Hello, my name is Samir Mohammed, and this is my research project for this class. And I wanted to choose. I chose to cover the travels of Ibn Battuta. So I prepared a 25 slide presentation, and I'd like to begin it. Um, so Ibn Battuta is known as a traveler across the Islamic world during his time. He is one of the great travelers, so like Marco Polo, Columbus, and he's in that era. He's in that the echelon of travelers. Um, so in his early years, he was born in Tangier, Morocco. His name is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Battuta and was born in February 24, 1304 in Tangier, Morocco. Um, he is born to a family where the tradition was to become a scholar. His family had roles as qadis and judges. He was a legal scholar as well, and was a judge. So he kept on his family tradition. For his scholarship, he was known to be a bright student and he was very interested in the faith, and you can notice that a lot while he was writing his book, which is where this whole story comes from. Without the book, we probably would never heard of him. Um, he did not have the opportunity to extend his education in Tangier because the difference that it was kind of far away from the hubs of education, which were like Baghdad, and Cairo, as well as Mecca and Medina. So those places where all the learning was happening, like Damascus and things like that. And he couldn't really continue his education in Tangier, so he left to go head west. He always had a yearning for travel. He wanted to see what the Islamic world had to offer, as known as Darul Islam. Ibn Battuta had a hunger for travel. All right. The most of the big madrasas, as I said, were in Cairo and Damascus, and used to be in Baghdad, but Baghdad was taken over by the Mongols, and a lot of things were lost over there. He prepared to go east to travel and obtain knowledge in order to uh, extend his faith. His first movement of travel was done to go to the Hajj. That was his first goal. On his way, uh, he left the city, and he as if he was gonna be gone forever, kind of. And he left his family and everyone. On his way to his first trip to Hajj, he passed through many great cities such as Cairo, Jerusalem, Damascus, and then uh, he traveled along the Royal Road, which was controlled by the Mamluk Empire at the time, and they were known for making safe and strict routes. So the routes were never like taken, and then you could literally walk from city to city with absolutely no problem, as it was guarded. And this is the era where the Mongols were still in power. The Mongols literally they went from all the way from China to all the way even into Europe, with the Golden Horde, the Ilkhan Empire, and then the Golden Horde as well, and the Chagatai Khanate, and then even all the way to the south, what's the main Mongol empire part. He traveled through all those great cities on his way to Mecca, and in Mecca, his first trip on his agenda was to go to the pilgrimage over in to the Kaaba and Masjid al Haram. He left his home with very little funds, and he had a lot of help on his way. So people, I believe I read somewhere while I was researching that he was gifted a camel and some gold by one of the rich caravan runner, the people who run the caravans. Out of yeah, and then he left his home to pursue the world. So he just didn't stay only in Mecca. He after he left Mecca, he started going to other places. Um, his plan was to get connections, find a job. Basically, that was his whole goal for this whole travel, was to get a job as a qadi. Um, he has gone to Hajj 7 times in his life, so that's how much traveling he did. Every now and then he would go to Hajj. So there's that. At his second Hajj, at the second Hajj point, he stayed in Mecca for 3 years to study. He stayed there to become more of a scholar, and he stayed there for 3 years. So I'm guessing he did Hajj 3 times as well while he was there. So that's one of his counts. His first truly travel, because the ones before was him going to Hajj and to stay in Mecca, so he didn't stay long in anywhere. But this is where his travel to the west truly begins, I would say, because most of the places that he's been before are well documented and everything. He first left out towards the land ruled by the Khans, known as the Mongols, and he headed there after reports of the rulers there that they were great patrons of the arts. The Mongols, they're technically, they used to be a society which was that worked by nomadic, but then they were known to take the cultures of people and take them as their own. So they were very great about that, I guess, and they even became Muslim at one point. He left Mecca on the official caravan of the Persian state, so he was well protected and everything. And he visited Baghdad, it was known as the epicenter of science and education. And he visited the ruins of the city. The city was put in ruins after the first massive wave of the Mongols came rushing through the Euro-Asia plate and took it all over. Batutta joined the Ilkhan on his royal caravan. So yeah, he caught the caravan a few days behind, and the Khan was he was surprised because the people morphed the practices of the people surrounding them. So they were almost like had the same kind of culture, but yeah. Well, unfortunately, Ilkhan died by being poisoned by a jealous wife of his, because he was preferred wives, and then he got bit by the poison and died. He visited modern-day Azerbaijan to visit Tabriz, one of the Ilkhan's capitals. That's where the Ilkhan went, and then he returned back to for Hajj once again. So you see, and every time he goes here and there, he gets a lot of money. He's known for getting. He's kind of money minded. He's a businessman, but he doesn't truly trade. He's a traveler, but he's a businessman. East Africa was, after he was done with the Khan, over in the Ilkhans and traveling up north to the Azerbaijan and stuff. His first goal was to go down the Red Sea to East Africa. So after 1 year staying in Mecca once again to do some more studying, he left to reach new places, and he headed towards the Red Sea in the coasts of Africa. The first stop was the city of Aden, on the coast of Yemen, over on the Gulf of Aden. He went southward to the port city of Mogadishu, the busiest and richest African port, visited the Sultan. He stayed in a lot of the port cities, and he didn't stay too long. He usually stays like maybe a month, or so he can like visit a place, learn more about it, try to see what's going on. And basically what he went on was a trip to muster money, basically. He almost died on his trips. He almost died after a guide attempted to steal his valuables after returning to Arabia from the African coast. So the moments he got to, I believe it was Yemen, and he was trying to get back, and then one of the guys tried to kill him, but then he beat him, and he tried to steal, but he couldn't, and he beat him off, and he was injured and had to walk back to the city. Yeah. Um, he was able to get a lot of money through doing work, being a qadi for like moments at a time. He then went back to Hajj again for the third time. So he goes, he goes around a lot. All right. After returning to Arabia, his next destination was Anatolia, modern day Turkey. He left Mecca to head to India. That was his goal, was to leave to India. But there's a theme with Batutta. He usually does side quests. So he says he's gonna go somewhere, but he's like, let's take a turn this way. He left Mecca to head to India, then ruled by a Muslim sultanate, but then could not find a guide to India for several months. And if he couldn't find a guide, he couldn't go there. So instead, he headed to the land of the Turks, in order to follow the caravan that led to India. So he went up there in as if there was trade routes that went straight to India, I believe. And he was surprised at how people were so kind to others and generosity of its people. People there were very kind. The lands were green. Everyone was nice. Visitors were welcome. He was very interested in the diversity of people who lived in the area as well, and was surprised at how people dressed and everything. But as his fortunes say, he was leaving the area and he was met with bad luck. He was misled by a guide that caught in a river and almost froze to death, but he made it back to the sea. It made it to the Black Sea. So this man almost dies many, many times, which is, to me, is amazing. The Golden Horde, the northern part of the Khanates, of the Mongols, was the next area that he visited, which was on the Black Sea. Battuta traveled along the Black Sea to the cities along the coast, and was surprised to see that there was like a mini mix of Europeans, even like Europeans from Italy and so forth. He was shocked at the sounds of the church bells, though. He was horrified by those, because where he's lived, it was Darul Islam, and then Darul Islam didn't really have many of these church bells or things like that, as Islam was the main religion. And even to the point where he was going angry. He caught the wind that the caravan of the Golden Horde was nearby, and that he would travel with them for protection. The Khan would travel as if the entire city was on the move. So that's the thing. The Khans were known for traveling. The travels of an entire city was on the move. So it's like a massive city, thousands of people, hundreds of wagons. And then every time they settle, it looks like you're looking at a city from the horizon. He met with the Khan Ozbeg, and stayed with him for a while. So he's known to have spoken to Khans, which is amazing to me, how he can do that, just being Qadi. One of the Khan's wives was pregnant, and Battuta was Battuta asked to join her caravan. This is one of the princesses that was married to the Khan himself. She was from Byzantium. The thing was, she was Christian, I guess, but then she was Muslim practices. And then as they went back to Constantinople, she kind of left Islam, I would say, where there was no calls to salat and things like that. As well, after she got there, she decided to stay there. So she kind of ran away. So that's the thing. While he was in Constantinople, he went alongside the princess with 5,000 horsemen, 500 personal soldiers, 200 slaves, slave girls, 400 wagons, 2,000 horses, and 500 oxes. The thing about the horses, the Mongols love their horses, so horses to them are cheap. So 2,000 of them is nothing for them. He stayed there in Constantinople for like a month, and was even able to meet the Emperor Andronicus III. So he even got to meet the Emperor of the Romans at that time, which is amazing to me. It's like, wow. He said that the state of Byzantium at that point was the former self of its older era because of all the medieval splits happening and the fall of Rome prior hundreds of years ago. So their power wasn't that big of a thing. And then after delivering the princess to the escorts, he went with the Golden Horde's the people who went with to deliver her, and then he went back. So after he got back, he found a trade route to get to Delhi and a guide, and he went to India, which was Delhi, India. The land was ruled by the infamous Muhammad Taghlaq, the Sultan of the Delhi Sultanate. Batutta was interested in getting a job there, as the Sultan was looking for scholars to surround himself. He was a fan of having foreigners in his party, and was keen of that, having the smartest people come to his country. The Sultan, though, had a bad side. The Sultan was known for his violent acts. This man was, I can almost say he was insane. With the acts of torture, he did flaying of people, crucifixions, death by elephant. I don't think he was a stable man, or he might have been insane, because he was killing his own scholars. Like, it didn't make any sense. He always thought people were against him, so he might have had a power trip or something like that. Batutta took the gamble though, and he signed a contract that says he would stay in India while he worked for. It's just a contract. He would stay there forever, kind of thing. He made 5,000 silver dinar a year. All right, the average family made only 5 silver dinar a month. This man was being paid handsomely for his work, which is amazing. He lived there. He lived like a noble while he was in Delhi, so he's basically a nobleman at this point. He became a judge, and then as he became a judge, he couldn't really do much because he didn't know how to speak the Persian. I think it's Farsi. He didn't really know how to speak that, so they just told him to approve things more of that while he had translators do it. So he was just there for like the looks, basically. And then he was given to be an overseer, to oversee the graveyards of the Sultan's place, while he left to fight his enemies. So this Sultan was known to going into war. That was his job, was going into war. So he'd be gone on campaigns. The Sultan went mad, and then he became to give suspicion of his own people, because other areas of his rule turned against him, and there was a lot of those things. And they began lashing out to those who even had a small relation to those who had fought against. So Batutta was put under guard for showing up on a list of his friends from a Sufi man who was killed for disobedience. This is how crazy it was. He didn't even do any disobedience. Batutta was fearing for his life. So what he did in fear, he rid himself completely of possessions and wore the clothes of a beggar and became a hermit and lived in a cave outside of Delhi for 5 months. That's how much fear consumed him, which is amazing. He was so scared. According to his book, he was eventually called back after the Sultan calmed down from his rampage, and he acted like nothing ever happened, which is the creepiest thing. He was on a kill list, but he never did anything to him. So he was offered a chance to go to China as an ambassador, and what went through his mind is obviously he did not want to stay with this crazy ruler, so he took it and didn't care. This was an opportunity to escape from the Sultan, and he accepted. He was accompanied with 15 messengers back to the home, to the 15 Chinese messengers to go back to their homeland with gifts to the emperor. The thing was, on his way to the coast of the caravan, he was raided by 4,000 Hindu rebels. All right, the Sultanate was not liked. So the 1,000 foot soldiers won, however, that were sent. So that shows the amount of power the Sultanate has. And then, but the problem was Batutta was chased away by horsemen while they were being attacked. Many people were killed, and he was robbed of everything except his shirt. So this man has very bad luck when it comes to losing everything. He was rescued later, while he was basically set to die. The only reason he would survive was because he was rescued by a Muslim village man after 8 days being out there. And he eventually got back to the caravan, which is more insane. He wasn't... It's like... It was like a side trip. And he got back. And then he continued on his way. So he didn't become a poor man. So, unfortunately, this continues again when there's another sea disaster on his way to reach China. And they stopped in Calicut to board the Chinese junk ships. But the junk ship that he was supposed to go on capsized because it went out to sea too early because of weather issues, and all the riches capsized, but he wasn't on there because he was busy doing something, and he couldn't make it on there. And by the time he saw it, the whole ship dropped into the sea. And in fear of going back, he decided not to go back. He said, nah, I'm not going back. I'm just going straight away from Delhi. Instead, he looked to get the favor of another sultan by joining a day-long battle. This man joined a war to appease a lord, basically. And then he fought one battle, they won, and then on the second battle, they began to lose, and he ran away, deserted them, as he knew it was a dead end. He was only there for the money, so obviously he would leave. His next area of interest was the Maldive Islands. He arrived here as a pit stop before heading to China. There was a delay to his plans as it was basically forced into a position by a chief judge, because they needed qadis, and they were recent, and they were Muslim, and they needed some people versed in Arabic and the laws of the Quran. He even married into the noble family from the Queen's family side, and he soon left to Sri Lanka to make pilgrimage to Adam's Peak, an area where it's shaped like a foot, and people called it like a natural like place by all of the religions over there. He left, and then after he was given gifts by the king, he left on a ship which capsized. All right, his ship fell into the ocean. He somehow survived. But after going out to sea again, and then he was raided by pirates after his ship capsized, and he was penniless once again. So this man has some really bad luck and really good luck. Well, like getting money and then getting broke and getting money again, which is amazing to me. Malaysia and Sumatra. He finally decided that it was that he was going to take the trip on his own after being met with so much bad luck, and his feeling of trust was just gone. And then he would just surf along the coast for safer trips. So he did a lot of coast jumping and not doing massive trips, one-way trips. He made it to Malaysia, where Islam was becoming a Muslim society due to trade agreements. So this is a very recent Islamic country or empire, basically. Before that, it wasn't. Due to trade and most of other countries being Islamic, so they decided to go with it. And he stayed there for a while, and continued on. He was finally able to get a Chinese junk while in Sumatra. He finally made it to China. China at the time was under the Mongol rule, so it was more of the Mongols. And this time it was the Yuan dynasty. That's what the era is called. But this is by the powerful descendants of Genghis Khan, so they had full control. Um, they lasted from 1260 to 1368. Batutta arrived after a 40-day trip sailing the sea, the South China Sea. Um, one of the first things he noticed was that everyone was wearing silk. Silk was just common clothing. It was like as if it was cotton, like today. He said silk was used on everyone, on peasants, on monks, and the porcelain was like the best in the world too. He was culture shocked though. The people of China did not. They ate, according to him, they ate pork, and they did idol worshipping, and considered them pagans. And he said they used to slaughter dogs and animals that to him are normal, and he was so scared. He said that he stayed most of the time. He just stayed in his house, and he said he traveled up to the Kano Balikh area, but it's kind of disputed. I believe it's Beijing, modern day Beijing, but it's disputed if it's true or not. And then he made a few connections there while he was there with rich traders, and he finally headed home towards Morocco. So he got as far as China, as like the saying says, going through the world of Islam for knowledge. So he got to China, and he said, "All right, I'll head back," and he began to head back. On his way back, the world was changing. There was power struggle issues happening all around the world. Remember, this was the medieval era, and the armies were just everywhere. Dar al-Islam was changing as well, and it was kind of consolidation was happening as many places were becoming one. And when he came back to India, there was like active wars happening, and Delhi was losing power, so he didn't really want to stay there. So he ditched them, and Delhi was eventually smashed. And then there was a new, they call it the Mongol. It's called the Mongol Empire, but Mughal Empire, which was a Muslim power that took over India after the Sultanate fell in Delhi, and he was and yes, on his return he decided to go to Persia, across the ocean on Persia to make Hajj, and he sailed to the coasts of Arabia, and then he noticed a lot of the places he visited, like the Ilkhanate, are gone or have been locked in warfare and have become famished lands. Once he reached Damascus, he heard that his father died, and his died 15 years prior to his travel, after he left for his travels, and then his 10-year-old son that had died that he never met in Damascus. So there was a lot of sadness for this man. A lot of things were lost. Here is the thing that sped up his travel back home was the bubonic plague. This was infecting the earth from China to Europe. It was destroying millions. The insanity of his travels was not yet to close, as he had to face the dangers of the plague. The plague was wreaking havoc, and it was not stopping for anyone. The plague destroyed around, for example, Damascus, 2,000 people died per day. That's how bad it is. And it killed millions of people. The Mongol dynasty was basically destroyed because of the death tolls. So the Mongol era ended as the bubonic plague hit its climax. So the Mongols fell because of power vacuums caused by dead rulers and people just dying so fast that there was no one ruling the lands, so havoc just happens. He was quite literally running away from the plague. He somehow survived, though. I think he didn't stay in the villages too long, because if there's a plague, don't go in there. That was one of the common sayings back there. Just continue. So he usually resupplied and left. He said while he was in Cairo, 24,000 people died per day in Cairo. And then he made Hajj real quick, and then he left to go back to Morocco. On his way back home, all the death around him had just psychologically had a toll on him. so much misfortune, so much death, children dying, and all of that kind of information. And so he took a boat and sailed back west to the Morocco. On his way, he learned that his mother had died a few months before he arrived home. Just imagine that happening. So unlucky. What if he didn't make a side trip for one? He might have seen his mother. It's not known if his mother heard about his travels, because word of mouth did go around, and he did see friends and travelers that he knew from Tangier. So they might have heard that he was on his way back home. His first action was first thing he did was visit his mother's grave, which shows his sign of love and sadness. It was a truly saddening event. He stayed there for a few days to mourn her, and then he headed out on another side trip. He doesn't stay very long at home. You'd think he would stay and talk more, but he went out to Al-Andalus. He heard that the great armies fighting in Spain to protect against the Spanish king, and he decided to head there. That was one of the reasons he left. To fight. By the time he showed up, the plague had just killed the king. He died from it. Therefore, the armies did not have any motivation to take over the land. Andalus would have been taken over in the 1400s by the Spanish Reconquista. Yeah. He traveled to the city of Granada during the period, and while the Alhambra was being built, which is a great scholarly. It is a mosque, and it's a nice building. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. He made one of his final trips was to Mali, to see if he could find a job, because it was a bustling area. It was known for the great Mansa Musa, who came a few years before he went out on his trip. And this man was so rich, because Mali was known for its gold. It supplied 2/3 of the earth's gold at that point, which is insanity. Mansa Musa was so wealthy that he carried so much gold and gave away so much that the price of gold depreciated 100 years. In Cairo, for example, that's how much it was. This man was so rich. He basically took an economy down. Mali was a developing Muslim empire, and Batutta was interested in going, and the whole rumors of riches and gold made him much more interested. The cultures of riches was quite different in Mali. They were not extravagant. The gifts like gold and such were not really a thing. One of the first things he received was just milk and porridge and honey and bread by the king, which he found was an insult. He only stayed 8 months there and left after being summoned by the Sultan of Morocco. And then this is where the compilation of his travels begin, and where the story of Ibn Battuta basically comes to a halt due to no more recordings post trip, post book. The Sultan of Morocco commanded Ibn Battuta, because he became such a legend that they had to write it down. It was common for people who went far out, or to Hajj, to record small novels about their trips and what they did while they were gone on their travels. The Sultan summoned a young writer called Ibn Juzay, a massive fanboy of Ibn Battuta. He met him in Granada while he was in Spain, and hearing about having the ability to write Ibn Battuta's story must have been the best thing ever. Just think of the massive history that this man went through, and all the stories. I could probably sit down and listen to Ibn Battuta for 5 years and I'd be bored. I don't blame him. The book was added for the descriptions. While they were writing the book, they had to take descriptions from other travelers in order to flesh out the areas he visited. So in case if he didn't mention too much about Damascus, the writer usually would take other traveler accounts of the city and write it down for background information. So it was it wasn't flavor text per se, but it was like to explain what the city was. When the book was completed, it was not well known at all. It was pretty interesting, but it's history, how history works. Nobody really cares about it until it's like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years pass, basically. Uh so they were rewritten actually. They didn't have printers back then. Into many libraries, and it wasn't until the 19th century when European historians got their hands on it, translated it, and because it was such a long time, like eight, what is it, like eight, right now it's like 700 years have passed since then, so it's much much more interesting. He died. So after the writing of the book, the story of Batutta is basically a mystery, since his travel just ended. Most say that he became a qadi to the Sultan of Morocco and had a family because Sultan of Morocco because of storytelling, and he was just amazing, man. He was just like a professional, so you wanted him around you because he was a great storyteller, and he was a scholar too, and he's been all around, so it's kind of like a bragging right just to have him in your party. Ibn Battuta died in 1368 or 69, and is still one of Tangiers greatest men. Many places are named after him, so he's a legend over there. This is the works cited. I used a website from Berkeley, um, and yeah, and that was all about Ibn Battuta. He's like one of the great scholar. He's like a great scholar that you would want to know more about. He makes like an impact. His impact is basically teaching us how the world of Islam how it used to work, and how things were interconnected, and how the Great Silk Road worked. This man is a very great source of information. Not that many things are known from back then, so it's great to hear about what the world was like and what great cities were like before. Yep, this was my presentation, and thank you for listening. And this was a great semester to work on this. Thank you.